Today we're looking at Saturn through all 12 signs and houses. If you saw last week's episode, you'll know that Saturn is the planet of time, limits, discipline, responsibility, and the deeply spiritual experience of being told no. In the chart, Saturn shows where life asks us to grow up, develop patience, and stop trying to solve everything with enthusiasm and a colourful hat. But Saturn doesn't work the same way for everyone. First we'll look at Saturn in the signs, which shows us how he behaves. Then we'll look at Saturn in the houses, which shows us where that fun, happy-go-lucky Saturn energy tends to show up in life. So if Saturn is the actor, the sign is the character they're playing, and the house is the stage. In this case, that would be a very cold stage, with one hard chair and a large sign that says,
"Tough love is still love,"
next to a collection of forms to fill in. So let's begin by sending Saturn around the Zodiac to see what happens when the Lord of Time, Karma, Boundaries and mildly depressing admin is forced to play all 12 roles. First up, we have Saturn in Aries, where Saturn is considered to be in fall, which is astrology's polite way of saying that he's not exactly enjoying himself. Here Saturn has to do his slow, careful, responsible Saturn work through Aries, the sign of speed, courage and opening doors with his forehead. This can turn raw impulse into disciplined action, giving courage under pressure and the patience to keep going when things get difficult. But it can also bring frustration. Aries wants to move now, Saturn wants to wait, so confidence can feel blocked until all that pressure eventually escapes through the nearest wall.
I provide discipline, structure and restraint. Great, let's do it quickly. That rather defeats the point.
Next we have Saturn in Taurus, which is a much more comfortable arrangement. Here the Lord of Time is expressing himself through the sign of money, comfort, food, and refusing to move unless there's a very good reason, and possibly cake. At its best, this can be patient, steady and reliable. Saturn in Taurus knows how to build slowly, save carefully, develop practical skills, and create something solid enough to last. But the danger is that all that stability can become rigid, security can become fear of change, and patience can become inertia.
We must create lasting value through patience and discipline. Brilliant. I'll start by sitting down for 12 years. That isn't quite what I meant.
Next we have Saturn in Gemini, where the Lord of Time has to express himself through the sign of communication, language and curiosity. At its best, this can create a serious, disciplined mind. Saturn in Gemini can be careful with words, good at structured learning, and able to turn scattered ideas into something clear and well thought out. But the danger is overthinking. Gemini wants to explore every possibility, so communication can become cautious, anxious, or trapped in a committee meeting inside the head.
We must think carefully before we speak.
Absolutely, but first I have 17 follow-up questions.
Oh, good.
Next we have Saturn in Cancer, where Saturn is considered to be in detriment, so the Lord of Time has been asked to do paperwork in a paddling pool. Here Saturn has to express himself through emotion, belonging, and the deep spiritual need to have a little cry and make some soup. At its best, this can give emotional strength, loyalty, and a serious sense of responsibility toward home and family. But the danger is emotional armor. Cancer wants to feel, bond and protect, while Saturn wants boundaries and control, so feelings can become guarded, private, or hidden behind a very well-defended crab shell.
We must establish emotional maturity and fortify our boundaries.
Lovely. I'll build a blanket fort where nobody is allowed in.
That may be slightly over-fortified.
Next we have Saturn in Leo, where Saturn is also considered to be in detriment. Here the Lord of Time has been booked to perform stand-up comedy. Leo is ruled by the Sun, so here Saturn has to express himself through creativity and performance. This can give steady confidence, disciplined creativity, and the patience to turn talent into something real. But it can also create self-consciousness. Leo wants to shine and be recognized, while Saturn wants restraint and dignity. So self-expression can become blocked, overly controlled, or too scared to come out of the dressing room.
Let us express ourselves with dignity and responsibility. Wonderful. Let's make a grand entrance. Please keep it modest. Then it isn't really an entrance.
Next we have Saturn in Virgo, where the Lord of Time expresses himself through work, service, routines, and the sacred art of noticing when one tiny thing is slightly wrong. At its best, this can be very disciplined, skillful, and genuinely useful. Saturn in Virgo knows how to improve systems, develop practical expertise, and get the job done properly. But the danger is perfectionism. Virgo wants to analyze and refine, while Saturn wants standards and consequences. So this can become worry, self-criticism, or spending 3 hours correcting a comma that nobody else had noticed.
I've made a list of how we can improve the system through careful planning.
Excellent. I've made a list of everything that's wrong with your list.
That sounds comprehensive.
Next we have Saturn in Libra, where Saturn is considered to be exalted, so he's been given a job with a desk, a nameplate, and a proper complaints procedure. Here Saturn expresses himself through relationships, balance, and the noble art of saying, let's be reasonable, while everyone else is throwing cushions. At its best, this can give loyalty and a strong sense of justice. Saturn in Libra takes relationships seriously and wants agreements that actually work. But the danger is over control. Libra wants harmony, while Saturn wants rules and boundaries. So relationships can become cautious, formal, or negotiated like a small international treaty.
We must build fair and lasting agreements.
Wonderful! I've drafted a relationship constitution.
Finally, someone sensible.
Next we have Saturn in Scorpio, where the Lord of Time has to express himself through intensity, secrets, and all the things that people usually keep locked up in the cellar. At its best, this can give emotional endurance and the courage to face difficult truths. Saturn in Scorpio can do serious inner work and come out stronger for it. But the danger is control. Scorpio wants depth and trust, while Saturn wants boundaries and protection. So this can become guarded, suspicious, or emotionally armoured, like a bank vault with abandonment issues.
We must face the truth with discipline. Very well. I've hidden it under 6 trapdoors. That may slow the process.
Next up we have Saturn in Sagittarius, where the Lord of Time expresses himself through belief, philosophy, and the dangerous conviction that one more book might finally explain everything. At its best, this can give disciplined wisdom and the patience to turn big ideas into lived principles, but the danger is dogma. Sagittarius wants freedom, meaning, and a wider horizon, while Saturn wants structure, proof, and a sensible itinerary. So this can become rigid belief, fear of the unknown, or trying to turn the great mysteries of life into a 4-part training manual.
We must seek truth through work and study.
I've packed 12 books and no clean socks.
That is not adequate preparation.
Next we have Saturn in Capricorn, where Saturn is in domicile, so the Lord of Time has finally found his home, his chair, and the correct form for requesting another form. Here Saturn expresses himself through ambition and long-term achievement. At its best, this can give discipline and the ability to build something through hard work. But the danger is becoming too severe. Capricorn wants results, while Saturn wants standards and consequences. So this can become cold, overworked, or convinced that rest is a moral failing.
We must climb steadily toward lasting achievement.
Right, I've cancelled lunch.
A promising start.
Next we have Saturn in Aquarius, where Saturn is also in domicile, so the Lord of Time has now been given a think tank and several concerns about the future of society. Here Saturn expresses himself through ideas, reform, and the noble dream of improving humanity by making everyone attend a meeting. At its best, this can give social responsibility and the ability to turn unusual ideas into lasting change, but the danger is becoming too detached. Aquarius wants progress, while Saturn wants structure, so this can become emotional distance, or trying to save humanity without actually speaking to any humans.
We must build a better future through structure and reason.
Okay, I've started a group chat.
Who's in it?
Everyone, whether they like it or not.
Finally, we've got Saturn in Pisces, where the Lord of Time expresses himself through dreams, imagination, and the vague feeling that everything is connected, but nobody brought a map. This can give emotional wisdom, creative discipline, and the ability to give form to spiritual or imaginative work, but it can also mean blurred boundaries. Pisces wants to dissolve and float gently through the mysteries of existence, while Saturn wants limits and a clearly labelled folder, so this can become confusion, escapism, or trying to build a fence out of seaweed.
We shall establish clear spiritual boundaries.
Okay, I've drawn a line in the water.
I'm not sure that's going to work.
So those are the signs, but now we need to look at the houses. These show where Saturn tends to show up in life. If the sign is the role Saturn is playing, the house is the part of the chart where he's been assigned to stand with a stopwatch and a disappointed look on his face. It's the area of life where we may meet delays, responsibilities, or slow serious growth. And because this is Saturn, slow serious growth usually begins with him pointing at something and saying,
That doesn't comply with regulations.
The first house is the house of identity, first impressions, and how we meet the world. With Saturn here, confidence may not come instantly. There can be self-consciousness, shyness, or the feeling of having to hold yourself together before you've even left the house. But over time, this can become self-respect, quiet strength, and the kind of presence that doesn't need to shout to be taken seriously.
Stand up straight, check your face, and try not to look like you're apologising for existing.
The second house is the house of money, possessions, values, and self-worth. With Saturn here, security may feel like something that has to be earned slowly. There can be money worries, fear of not having enough, or a tendency to measure self-worth by what feels safe and practical. But done well, this becomes financial discipline, steady values, and a stronger sense of what is genuinely worth building.
I've reviewed the budget, and apparently Joy will have to wait until the next financial quarter.
The third house is the house of communication, learning, siblings, neighbours, and the everyday chatter of life. With Saturn here, words may not always come easily. There can be caution around speaking up, a serious approach to learning, or the feeling that every text message needs to be checked 17 times before sending. But handled with care, this becomes clear thinking, careful communication, and the ability to say something properly rather than just loudly.
Before we send that message, let's read it again and imagine every possible way it could be misunderstood.
The fourth house is home, family, and emotional foundations. So here Saturn's lessons may arrive through family responsibility, a need for security, or the feeling that safety has to be built slowly rather than simply received. In other words, Saturn has come to inspect the basement.
There's damp in the ancestral foundations, emotional subsidence in the rear wall, and someone has been storing unresolved issues under the stairs.
The fifth house is the house of creativity, pleasure, romance, children, and the things we do simply because they make life feel brighter. With Saturn here, fun may not always feel easy or spontaneous. There can be caution around self-expression, fear of looking silly, or the feeling that creativity has to be taken seriously before it's allowed out in public. At its best, this becomes disciplined creativity, loyal affection, and the ability to turn play into something lasting.
I have reviewed the concept of fun, and I believe it could benefit from clearer boundaries.
The sixth house is the house of work, routines, health, chores, and the daily habits that quietly run the show. With Saturn here, everyday life can feel full of duties and responsibilities. There may be pressure to be useful, organised, and constantly improving, which can become exhausting if everything turns into a job. But it can also create discipline, healthier routines, and the ability to build a life that actually functions.
I've made a daily schedule for your well-being. Unfortunately, it includes laundry.
The seventh house is the house of relationships, partnerships, marriage, and the people we meet face to face. With Saturn here, relationships may feel serious from the start. There can be caution around commitment, fear of rejection, or a tendency to test whether people are reliable before fully letting them in. The gift is loyalty, maturity, and the ability to build partnerships that can actually stand up to real life.
Love is important, but we need to discuss expectations and who's doing the washing up.
The eighth house is the house of intimacy, shared resources, trust, loss, and the deeper emotional material we don't usually bring up over lunch. With Saturn here, vulnerability may feel difficult, and sharing control with another person can bring up fear, caution, or the need to protect yourself. The lesson is learning how to trust wisely, handle other people's baggage without carrying all of it, and face difficult truths without locking them in the cellar.
Before we merge anything, I'd like separate accounts, clear boundaries, and a full inventory of emotional issues.
The ninth house is the house of belief, travel, higher learning, and the search for meaning. With Saturn here, faith and big ideas may need to be tested rather than simply accepted. There can be caution around taking risks, travelling far from the familiar, or trusting a worldview that hasn't earned its keep. But this can also become real wisdom, beliefs that have been questioned, studied, and lived rather than just collected like fridge magnets.
A belief is not a souvenir. Stop collecting them and show me which one actually holds your life together.
Now let's move Saturn into the 10th house. This place is all about career, reputation, and the role we play in public life. So here Saturn can bring ambition, but also pressure. There may be a feeling that success has to be earned the hard way, that you have to prove yourself before anyone takes you seriously.
Congratulations, you're now senior enough to receive more work, more blame, and a mug that says team leader.
The 11th house is the house of friends, groups, communities, and hopes for the future. With Saturn here, belonging may not always feel easy. There can be caution around groups, responsibility within a community, or the feeling of being slightly outside the circle looking in. The upside is learning how to choose the right people, build lasting friendships, and contribute to something bigger.
Friendship is important, but please remember that not every WhatsApp group deserves your soul.
The 12th house is the house of solitude, dreams, hidden fears, and the parts of life that happen behind the scenes. With Saturn here, there may be a private sense of heaviness, responsibility, or guilt that isn't always easy to explain. This can feel lonely at times, but it can also become deep inner strength, spiritual discipline, and the ability to sit quietly with yourself without immediately looking for the emergency biscuits.
I've checked the unconscious, and several of your fears are still running in the background.
And that is Saturn through all 12 signs and houses. So wherever Saturn appears in your chart, he tends to bring lessons around patience, limits, responsibility, and the deeply irritating process of becoming a more capable human being. He may involve delays, doubts, duties, and the occasional emotional building inspection, but Saturn is also where we learn what can actually last. Next time we'll be moving from Saturn to Jupiter, which should come as a tremendous relief to absolutely everyone. Saturn says no, Jupiter says yes, and the Fool asks if there's a buffet. Until then, check your boundaries, read the small print, and don't forget to fill in the appropriate form for spiritual development.